I never wanted to be the guy who goes to war with his homeowners association. I'm just a regular software engineer who wanted a quiet place to live and work. When I bought my modest 3-bedroom house in Oak Ridge Estates 5 years ago, I was actually relieved there was an HOA. I thought it meant no neglected properties, no eyesores, stability in home values, the works. Oak Ridge Estates was everything I wanted in a neighborhood. The streets were lined with mature oak trees. The houses were well maintained with just enough variety to avoid looking cookie-cutter, and the small community pool and park gave the place a friendly, family atmosphere. It was a peaceful suburb where people waved as they walked their dogs and kids rode bikes in the cul-de-sacs. For the first 3 years, everything was fine. I paid my dues, $350 quarterly, attended the occasional meeting, and went about my life. The neighborhood was well maintained, with manicured common areas and a small community pool that was perfect for the hot summer months. Then everything changed when the board elections brought in a new president, Karen Wilkins. I know, her name was actually Karen. You can't make this stuff up. I first met Karen at the community pool on a sweltering Saturday in July. I was reading on a lounge chair when a shadow fell across my book. Excuse me, but that chair doesn't belong in that spot. I looked up to see a woman in her late 50s with a meticulously maintained blonde bob, designer sunglasses, and a clipboard. I'm sorry? The pool furniture has designated positions. There's a diagram posted on the bulletin board. This chair belongs over there. She pointed to the opposite side of the pool. I looked around. The pool area was nearly empty, and no one seemed bothered by my chair's position. Does it really matter? I'm not blocking anyone. Her lips thinned. Rules are rules. I'm Karen Wilkins, the new HOA president. And you are? Alex Chen. I've lived here for 3 years now. Well, Mr. Chen, I suggest you familiarize yourself with our updated community guidelines. We're implementing several changes to improve property values. I moved the chair to appease her, but as I watched her marching around the pool area, rearranging furniture and scolding a teenage girl for having a popsicle, I had a sinking feeling that life at Oak Ridge Estates was about to change. A week later, I found my first warning notice taped to my front door. Violation. Unauthorized garden border stones. All landscaping modifications must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee. I stared at the small river rocks I'd placed around my flower bed 2 years ago, confused why they were suddenly a problem. I had no idea this was just the beginning. After that first warning, I did what any reasonable person would do. I went to the HOA office to discuss the river rocks that had never been an issue before. Mr. Chen, Karen said from behind her desk in the small HOA office near the pool, the previous board was far too lax in enforcing our community standards. Just because a violation went unnoticed in the past doesn't mean it's approved. I tried to stay calm. But these rocks have been there for 2 years. The previous board members saw them dozens of times. Did you submit Form AR7 for landscaping modifications? She asked, tapping her pen on a stack of papers. No, because they're just decorative rocks. Then they're unauthorized. You have 2 options. Remove them or submit the proper paperwork for review and pay the $50 application fee. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I chose the path of least resistance and removed the rocks. It wasn't worth fighting over. But a week later, I received another notice. Violation. Garbage bin visible from street beyond permitted hours. Please note this is a $50 fine. I was certain I'd brought my bin in before the 7 p.m. deadline. When I called to question the fine, I was told there was photographic evidence. A picture of my bin taken at 7:05 p.m. 5 minutes. They were fining me for 5 minutes. When I attended the next HOA meeting to appeal, Karen's demeanor changed completely. Mr. Chen, rules without enforcement are merely suggestions, she declared, looking down at me over her reading glasses. If we make an exception for you, we'd have to make exceptions for everyone. Her 2 allies on the board, a retired accountant named Richard and a real estate agent named Tiffany, nodded in agreement. My appeal was denied in a 3-2 vote. As I left the meeting, An older woman named Barbara whispered to me, "Don't take it personally, dear. She's on a power trip." She did the same thing to the Johnsons last month over their bird feeder. But I noticed something odd. Certain residents never seemed to receive notices or fines, despite clear violations. Like Karen's friend Deborah, whose enormous boat sat in her driveway year-round, or board member Richard, whose house was painted a shade of beige distinctly different from the approved color palette. I paid the fine, thinking this would be the end of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. Over the next few months, the violations became more frequent and increasingly ridiculous. $75 for parking my car in my driveway overnight instead of in the garage. $100 for unauthorized holiday decorations when I put up Christmas lights 2 days before the official decorating period. $150 for the wrong shade of white paint on my mailbox. Each time I appealed, I was shot down by the board's 3-2 vote. The two other board members, Jim and Sarah, often looked uncomfortable, but never went against Karen, Richard, and Tiffany. Then I met Tom, my neighbor from 3 doors down, who had received a $300 fine for having a basketball hoop in his driveway, something that had been there for 5 years without issue. "This is getting out of control," Tom told me as we compared our growing collections of violation notices. "Did you know they're installing cameras at the entrance and around the common areas? For security purposes, they say." "With what money?" I asked. "Our HOA fees haven't increased." That's what I asked at the last meeting. Karen just said it was allocated from the reserve fund and moved on. Tom and I started attending every HOA meeting together, questioning each decision. We were joined by a growing group of disgruntled homeowners who were also facing unprecedented fines and restrictions. Then I received the certified letter that changed everything. The letter was printed on official HOA letterhead, with Karen's signature at the bottom. "Dear Mr. Chen, it has come to our attention that the renovation of your home office, conversion of the 3rd bedroom, was performed without HOA approval. This constitutes a major violation of the CC&Rs, Section 12, Paragraph 4. You are hereby fined $5,000 and must restore the room to its original condition within 30 days or face additional penalties of $250 per day." I nearly choked on my coffee. $5,000? For what? I hadn't renovated anything. The office was just a bedroom where I'd put a desk and some bookshelves. There were no structural changes, no exterior modifications, nothing that could possibly require HOA approval. I immediately called the management company that handled our HOA's administration. "This must be a mistake," I explained to the representative. "I haven't renovated anything." "I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, but according to our records, a complaint was filed with photographic evidence. The board reviewed and approved the fine." "Photographic evidence? Can I see it?" "You'll need to request that in writing from the board." I did exactly that, sending a formal letter requesting the evidence and a hearing. 3 days later, I received my response. The hearing was scheduled for the following month, and the evidence consisted of a single photo taken through my window showing my desk and computer monitors. This was absurd. Nothing in our CC&Rs prohibited using a bedroom as an office. I did more research and discovered that home offices specifically required approval only if they were for businesses with client traffic, which mine definitely wasn't. I presented this at the hearing, along with the relevant sections of our community guidelines. Karen's response? "The board has determined that the presence of multiple computer monitors indicates professional use, which requires prior approval. I'm a software engineer. I work remotely. There are no clients coming to my home. The decision stands, Mr. Chen. Pay the fine or face further penalties." That night, I couldn't sleep. $5,000 was a significant sum, and the principle of the thing made my blood boil. I was being targeted, but why? Was it because I questioned some of Karen's initiatives at the annual meeting, or was it something else entirely? The next morning, I received another shock. A notice of lien being placed on my home for unpaid fines and assessments. The total had somehow ballooned to $7,500 with late fees and administrative costs. This was the breaking point. A lien could prevent me from refinancing or selling my home. It could damage my credit score. It was no longer just about petty rules. This was threatening my largest investment and my financial future. I immediately called Tom and several other neighbors who had been facing similar issues. We gathered at my house that evening. They've placed a lien on my house. I told the group of 8 concerned homeowners, "Has this happened to anyone else?" 3 hands went up. "They're threatening to foreclose on me if I don't pay $12,000 in fines by the end of the month," said Barbara, the older woman who had first warned me about Karen. "I'm on a fixed income. I can't afford this." Tom slammed his fist on the table. "This is extortion. Has anyone tried to get a lawyer involved?" "I called a few," said Mark, another neighbor. "None would take the case. They said HOA disputes are complicated and expensive to fight. And frankly, most of us can't afford to hire a lawyer," added Barbara. I felt a sense of helplessness washing over me, but also a growing anger. This wasn't just about inconvenient rules anymore. People's homes, their largest investments and places of safety, were being threatened. "I know someone," I said finally. "My college roommate Mike is a real estate attorney. Let me call him." Mike answered on the first ring, as if he'd been expecting my call. "This sounds like classic HOA overreach," Mike said after I explained the situation. "But fighting these things can be expensive and time-consuming. Sometimes it's cheaper to just pay the fine." "It's not about the money anymore," I replied. "These people are threatening to take people's homes over ridiculous violations. Something feels off about this whole situation. I want to know what's really going on." Mike sighed. "All right, send me all the documentation, the CC&Rs, the bylaws, meeting minutes, every communication you've had with them, and get the same from your neighbors if possible. I'll take a look." As I hung up, I looked around at my neighbors, good people who had worked hard for their homes, now living in fear of losing them over petty rules and suspicious fines. "We're going to fight back," I promised them. "We're going to find out what's really going on here." Little did I know, we were about to uncover something far worse than we imagined. Mike called me 2 weeks later, his voice unusually animated. "Alex, I think you need to do some digging into your HOA's finances. There are some red flags here." "What kind of red flags?" "For starters, your CC&Rs require detailed quarterly financial reports to be made available to all homeowners. Have you ever seen these?" "No," I realized. "They just give summary numbers at the meetings." That's a violation right there. And these fines, they're way above what's allowable by state law for first offenses. Plus, the procedures they're following don't match their own bylaws. My interest was piqued. What should I do? "Request a complete financial audit for the past 3 years. You have the right to see these records. Also, start talking to your neighbors. See if others are experiencing similar issues." The next day, I submitted a formal request for financial records. The response was immediate and hostile. A curt email stating that such records were confidential board information, and my request was denied. This was a clear violation of both our bylaws and state law. I sent a follow-up letter, citing the specific legal requirements. This time, Karen herself called me. "Mr. Chen, these constant requests are becoming harassment," she said coldly. "The board is not obligated to provide confidential financial details to individual homeowners." Actually, Karen, according to State Code Section 720.303, you absolutely are required to provide these records upon request. I can involve my attorney if necessary. There was a long pause. "Fine. The records will be available for viewing, not copying, at the management office next Tuesday at 2 p.m. For 30 minutes only. It wasn't ideal, but it was a start. I took the day off work and arrived at the management office with my phone's camera ready. The office manager, a nervous young woman named Melissa, showed me to a small room where a stack of folders waited. "Mrs. Wilkins said you can look but not make copies," Melissa reminded me. "I understand," I said, even as I planned to photograph every page the moment she left the room. What I found in those 30 minutes made my blood run cold. First, the fines. The HOA had collected over $120,000 in fines over the past 2 years, an astronomical amount for a community of just 78 homes, but the financial statements only showed $35,000 in compliance revenue. Second, there were invoices from vendors that made no sense. $25,000 for landscape improvements that I'd never seen, $30,000 for pool maintenance from a company I couldn't find on Google, and most suspicious of all, $45,000 for legal consultations from a firm called WRK Legal Partners. I managed to photograph about 60% of the documents before Melissa returned. That evening, I searched for WRK Legal Partners and found nothing. No website, no business registration, nothing. On a hunch, I rearranged the letters. WRK, Wilkins, Richard, Karen. They were embezzling HOA funds. The next day, I began a careful canvass of my neighbors. Most were reluctant to talk at first. Karen had created a culture of fear in the community, but once I mentioned the financial discrepancies, people opened up. They fined me $3,000 for a shed that was approved by the previous board, confided Bill, a retired teacher from down the street. I've been paying $200 a month extra for a special assessment for road repairs that never happened, said Maria, a nurse who lived on the corner. Pattern by pattern, a picture emerged. Karen and her allies weren't just power tripping. They were running a sophisticated scheme to extract money from homeowners and funnel it into their own pockets. I brought my findings to my neighbors, and our small resistance group grew. We contacted local news stations and a reporter from the city newspaper who specialized in consumer affairs. The story was gaining traction. But then I made a discovery that would change everything. One that would give me not just evidence against the HOA, but actual. The meeting was held in our community center, a small building next to the pool. Nearly every homeowner attended, unusual for our typically poorly attended HOA meetings. The proposed $2,000 assessment had everyone concerned. Karen opened the meeting with her typical authoritarian style. We'll keep this brief. The board has determined that security upgrades are necessary for our community's safety and property values. The cost will be $2,000 per household, due within 30 days. Any questions? Several hands shot up, but Karen ignored them. If there are no questions, we'll move to a vote. I stood up. I have a question, Karen. She glared at me. Mr. Chen, we're trying to keep this meeting moving along. I think the homeowners deserve to know exactly what these security upgrades entail and why they cost $156,000. Karen's face tightened. The details are outlined in the proposal, which was emailed to everyone. That proposal contains no actual breakdown of costs or specific improvements, I countered, just vague references to enhanced security measures. Mr. Chen, if you have concerns, you can submit them in writing after the meeting. I smiled. Actually, I'd like to discuss them now. And while we're at it, I'd also like to discuss the $250,000 that you, Richard, and Tiffany have embezzled from this community over the past 3 years. The room went completely silent. Karen's face turned red. That is a slanderous accusation. I'll have you sued for defamation. It's not slander if it's true, I replied calmly, pulling out a thick folder. I have copies of all the financial records showing the discrepancies, the fake invoices from non-existent companies, the legal consultations from WRK Legal Partners, a company that doesn't exist except as an acronym for your names, the missing fine money, all of it. Richard jumped to his feet. This meeting is adjourned. Everyone leave now. The meeting is not adjourned, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. Because as of right now, I'm calling for an emergency vote to remove the current board, as is my right under our bylaws when evidence of malfeasance is presented. Tiffany laughed nervously. You can't do that without board approval for the vote. Actually, he can, said Janet, the former treasurer, standing up from the back. Article 8. Section 3 of our bylaws specifically allows for emergency removal votes when financial impropriety is alleged. Karen's composure cracked. This is ridiculous. We've done nothing wrong. These are baseless accusations from a disgruntled homeowner who refuses to follow the rules. I projected photos of the financial documents onto the wall. These don't look baseless to me. And by the way, I've already provided copies to the police and the district attorney's office. The room erupted. Neighbors were standing, shouting questions at Karen and the board. Some were taking pictures of my projected evidence with their phones. Karen pounded her gavel. Enough. As board president, I have the authority to eject disruptive members from this meeting. Mr. Chen, leave immediately or we'll call security. That's when I played my ace. That's going to be difficult, Karen, since I own this building, and the pool, and the park, and all the common areas of Oak Ridge Estates. The room went silent again. What are you talking about? Karen sputtered. I held up another document. This is the deed to all common areas of Oak Ridge Estates, legally transferred to my LLC 3 weeks ago. The original 30-year lease from the developer expired. The property was legally abandoned, and I claimed it through adverse possession. It's all perfectly legal and filed with the county. That's impossible, Richard shouted. Check with the county recorder if you don't believe me, I replied. But the practical upshot is this. The HOA has been operating without legal ownership of its common areas for 2 years, and now, as the legal owner, I'm exercising my right to terminate the HOA's use of my property, unless certain conditions are met. The community center was in complete disarray. Neighbors were shouting. Karen was frantically texting someone, probably a lawyer, and Richard looked like he was about to have a heart attack. This is outrageous, Karen finally managed. You can't just claim ownership of community property. I didn't just claim it, I explained patiently. I went through all the proper legal channels. The fact is, the HOA never actually owned these properties. They were leased from the original developer, and when that lease expired, the HOA failed to secure proper ownership. It's all in the public record. One of my neighbors, a real estate attorney named David, spoke up. He's right. I just checked the county records on my phone. The common areas are now owned by. He squinted at his screen. Oak Ridge Homeowners Protection LLC. Is that you, Alex? I nodded. It is, and as the legal owner of these properties, I have some demands. This is blackmail, Tiffany shouted. No, it's negotiation, I corrected. Here are my terms. First, Karen, Richard, and Tiffany resign from the board immediately. Second, all improperly levied fines for the past 3 years are refunded in full. Third, the HOA returns to the original CC and Rs without the dozens of restrictive amendments you've added. And if we refuse, Karen asked, her voice ice cold. Then effective tomorrow, the community pool, park, and this building will be closed to all residents. I'll fence them off if necessary, and I'll raise the leasing fee for these amenities to something the HOA can't possibly afford. A murmur ran through the crowd. I raised my hand for silence. But I have no desire to punish my neighbors for the actions of a corrupt board, so I'm also offering an alternative. We can dissolve the current HOA entirely and form a new homeowners cooperative that will purchase the common areas from my LLC for exactly $1. This new organization will have strict financial oversight, term limits for board members, and reasonable rules decided by majority vote. The room broke into chaos again, but this time with a different energy. Neighbors were talking excitedly about the possibilities. No more petty fines. No more color-coordinated blinds. No more Karen. You can't do this, Karen hissed, approaching me as the crowd discussed options. We have contracts, obligations. Yes, you certainly do have obligations to the homeowners whose money you've been stealing. I suggest you worry more about your legal defense than about maintaining your power. The meeting continued for 3 more hours. By the end, we had voted 67-3 to remove Karen, Richard, and Tiffany from the board, elected an interim board of 5 homeowners, including myself, approved a full forensic audit of the HOA finances, voted to pursue legal action against the former board members for recovery of misappropriated funds, agreed in principle to dissolve the current HOA and form a new homeowners cooperative. Karen, Richard, and Tiffany left the meeting in disgrace, followed by police officers who had arrived to take statements about the financial improprieties. As I walked home that night, neighbors I barely knew stopped to shake my hand or pat me on the back. For the first time in years, there was a sense of community in Oak Ridge Estates. The real work was just beginning, but I finally felt at home in my neighborhood. 6 months after that fateful meeting, Oak Ridge Estates was transformed. The legal proceedings against Karen, Richard, and Tiffany were ongoing, but the early results were promising. The forensic audit had uncovered even more theft than I had initially found, nearly $380,000 over 4 years. The district attorney had filed criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud, and all 3 were facing serious prison time. Through a civil suit, we already recovered about $210,000, which was placed in a trust for the new homeowners cooperative. Karen's vacation home in Florida, purchased with stolen HOA funds, was in the process of being seized and liquidated. The new cooperative was a completely different entity from the old HOA. We dissolved the original association, which was surprisingly easy given that they didn't actually own any property, and formed a new organization with a clear constitution. Board members were limited to 2 one-year terms. All financial records were publicly accessible to members at all times. Major decisions required a 2/3 majority vote of all homeowners. Fines could only be imposed after multiple warnings and a hearing. The rules were simplified to focus on genuine community interests rather than aesthetic control. Quarterly dues had been reduced to $200, less than half of what we'd been paying under Karen's regime, yet we were providing better services. The pool was renovated, the small park got new playground equipment, and we even started a community garden in an unused corner of the common area. Most importantly, neighbors were talking to each other again. Without the atmosphere of surveillance and punishment, people felt free to interact, to help each other, to build real community bonds. As promised, I transferred ownership of all common areas to the cooperative for $1. My brief career as a property magnate was over, but I'd gained something much more valuable, a neighborhood where I actually wanted to live. There were still challenges, of course. Some residents wanted more rules, others wanted none. Finding the balance that served everyone's interests was an ongoing conversation, but it was just that, a conversation, not a dictatorship. One sunny Saturday, about 8 months after the confrontation, I was grilling in my backyard when there was a knock at my gate. It was Bill, the retired teacher who'd been fined $3,000 for his shed. "Got room for one more?" he asked, holding up a 6-pack of craft beer. As we sat in my non-regulation patio furniture, enjoying non-regulation grilled food, Bill raised his bottle in a toast. "To the man who saved Oak Ridge Estates by owning it." I laughed and clinked my bottle against his. I never wanted to own it. I just wanted it to be fair. "Sometimes that's what it takes," Bill said thoughtfully. "Someone willing to stand up and say enough." Later that evening, as neighbors gathered for an impromptu block party, something that would have incurred massive fines under the old regime, I looked around at the smiling faces and felt a deep satisfaction. Karen had tried to use the HOA to build her little kingdom, to control her neighbors and enrich herself at our expense. She'd assumed that regular people like me would always back down, always pay the fines, always surrender to authority. She'd been wrong. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you should worry about most. As the sun set over our little community, I found myself grateful for Karen's overreach. Without her greed and cruelty, we might have continued as a collection of isolated houses, bound by nothing but proximity and restrictive covenants. Instead, we become something better, neighbors in the truest sense of the word. And that was worth every moment of the fight. Epilogue. Karen, Richard, and Tiffany all eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges. Karen received 18 months in prison, while Richard and Tiffany got 12 months each, plus probation and restitution payments. The story of our HOA battle made the local news, then spread to national outlets. I've since received emails from homeowners across the country, asking for advice on dealing with their own HOA problems. I always tell them the same thing. Read your documents carefully, know your rights, and remember that HOAs are meant to serve homeowners, not rule them. Oh, and check who actually owns the common areas. You never know what you might find.